All praise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and peace and blessings to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his sahaba and all those who follow him till the day of judgment. So we have been covering whether science is racist, is intrinsically racist. So we have looked at the history of science, the human zoo, and we have looked at some of the sciences like craniometry and phrenology, which were basically meant for racism. They have been transformed into neuro sciences. We saw all that, and we have come. So palmistry is no longer called palmistry. What is it called? Anyone remember? Palmistry is now called what? Dermatoglyphics. Palmistry is no longer called palmistry, but it's called dermatoglyphics, and is supported by what? By neuroscience and genetics. This is what we went through, right? Last time. So the question comes, what is science and pseudoscience? What is the demarcation? So we have already looked at that, but I just wanted everybody to remember that. That is not an easy question. Now we come to another science which is called allometry. This is basically the study of relationship of body size to shape, anatomy, physiology, and it has been used extensively for a lot of things. And I'm not going to go into details of allometry, but let's look at just a couple of things here. It is been studied, especially with lizards, where they say that lizards exhibit changes during their ontogeny. Do you remember our lecture about ontogeny and phylogeny? Where remember his, what's his name? I can't remember his name. Where he recapitulation theory, where the embryo goes through all the phases of evolution, the human being. Remember that? And
chicken embryo and dinosaur embryo.
Exactly are the same. So ontogeny repeats phylogeny, or phylogeny, whatever. I can't remember that. So anyway, so this is very similar to that. And what they have used in evolutionary method is called phylogenetic comparative methods, using allometry to compare the phylogeny of a species. And look, and this is Rensch's rule, is say the relationship between the extent of sexual size dimorphism and which sex is larger. And what they have done is very interesting, is that what they are saying is the difference in the male and female gender in animals is due to all these things, and what they are saying is this can be explained by allometry and confounding factors such. So here you have the comparative methods used in historical lineage of phylogenetics, and it's very interesting to see when it's something that is not well established, but it starts being used to compare things. Let me clarify when I say it's not been well established. Look at this sentence here: after controlling for confounding factors such as evolutionary history. For a layman, this might seem a very normal statement. But what is confounding factors? How do you control confounding factors? You know what confounding factors are? If a factor is something, effect is affected by two causes. So Z is affected by X and Y. How will you empirically find out how much X contributes to Z and how much Y contributes to Z? Can you do that? Is it possible? In this room, do you think we can actually precisely measure how much nitrogen and hydrogen sulfide is at this present moment? We know they are there, but to be precisely
every molecule,
it's not possible. Even that approximation is, we can go into that whole details later on. So,
but what about those companies who comes and measure the
approximation,
right? That range.
Yes. So, and then you want to extrapolate all these things all the way back to billions of years. I will question the methodology very carefully before I give up my aqidah.
What's the relation of billions of years here? Come again, please.
So here, basically, allometry, the size and all these things, is being used to capture the evolutionary history of species and lineages, and try to using Rensch's rule here to establish evolutionary history. Okay, and support evolutionary theory. Basically, we come back again to the same quotation: is the more things change, the more they stay the same. You change the names of stuff, but you're actually, on the back of your mind, you're just trying to prove the same old stuff. You can change the tires on a car, but the car will remain old. It doesn't become a new car. And this is a reminder to all of us from our Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam that just because somebody is speaking eloquently doesn't mean he's speaking the haqq. Just because he knows how to effectively deliver something, doesn't mean that he has the right message. Sometimes we are mesmerized and dazzled by people using big words, and then so, ooh, this must be correct. Here are Clarke's 3 laws. And basically this is the one that I wanted to talk about, is for every expert there's an equal and opposite expert. But for every fact, there's not necessarily an equal and opposite fact. Just remember that. People always say these things. So you to understand what they're saying, people say, oh, I can also get another theory that would disprove your theory. Yes. For every theory, you can have a counter theory in science. But for every fact, you don't have a counter fact. Let me explain that in another way. The sun exists. One theory is the sun is a god. What is the counter theory to that? The sun is just a matter. Those are 2 extremes, right? We just did that quote here, difference between philosophy and science, so I don't think is necessary. It's very interesting to see people who are actually practicing science, see what they are saying. Next is the Movius Line is a very interesting period of, remember our topic is scientific racism. So this is another interesting area in science where your prejudiced mind is taking the empirical evidence and supporting what? Racism. So here this guy came up with the fact that hand axes, the axis of the hand, were found in a certain pattern, and he put this on in a map, and he says, you know what? The reason why this is because the Asians had smaller skulls than the Europeans, and therefore they lacked the biological and cognitive deficiency, to progress further technologically. See, I don't want to go into details, I just bring it here. Let's look at the next one.
No, it's a pseudoscience, right?
Which one?
The previous one.
This Movius line? No, it's not accepted as, because we know that line, the interpretation of that line is colored with racism. So that's not correct. Let's look at another aspect, Lunate Sulcus. What is this? These are basically endocasts of the cranium cavity of fossils, right? So I will explain it to you here. So basically what happens in the study of evolutionary fossils, what they do is they take cast of the cranium and they try to analyze the imprints that he was talking about. And they have come to this hypothesis that the expansion of those ridges and the movement of those ridges in the cranium is what differentiates us from animals, primates, into humans, right? Very logical. But the basic assumption behind that is what?
Evolution. That
a structure exists for that function. Yeah. So this is the ridges here that are talking about. This is the chimpanzee, and these are 2 humans ones illustrating this thing. So now Look at this, what this guy is talking. It turns out that the Lunate Sulcus does not actually exist in humans. Forget about the brain being evolving. That structure that people are talking about that proves evolution doesn't exist in humans. As the grooves identified as such are not structurally or functionally the same as the Lunate Sulcus in apes. So what are you talking about?
When I read medicine in when I was reading this in 1994, 93, we read it.
Yes. Yes.
In 2006, they said it's Lunate Sulcus.
It doesn't mean that everybody agrees with it, but this guy comes and says it doesn't exist. So even before, let me tell you what happens now. Even before somebody jumps to me and say, do you support evolution? Is Islamic evolution supported by the Quran or not? First, you go and tell me whether all the evidence that for evolution really exists or not. Why will I take a position? Why will I waste my time? Yeah, he comes at a very good time. His question last time, just so that everybody remembers, is before it was craniometry. So what about the inside this skull, the gray matter? Remember that your question? So the Lunate Sulcus actually doesn't exist, according to this author. Huh? So forget about proving evolution and European dominance. First you have to prove whether it exists or not. These are references for me, so just let's go on. This whole page I just copied and pasted here. It's not for this is the whole discussion on a white supremacist site using Lunate Sulcus as a proof that Europeans, whites, are superior to other races. Can you imagine
Well, they're still teaching it.
Yes. Something this is discredited. Forget, I cannot really expand on this thing. Something that doesn't exist. You are using it for evolutionary theory, and then you are using it for scientific racism, political domination, oppression. Huh? But how many people understand these things? They are ready to jump into the discussion. Okay, so let's recap here. Craniometry is a pseudoscience. Yes, we found that Lunate Sulcus may or may not exist. Just before we can even continue on this thing, let's look at this. Now they've come up with what? Gyrification Index. What is Gyrification Index? You see the folds,
Sulcus and gyruses. The trough and crust of the ape.
Yeah.
So
Here they are basically, this is the matter inside the skull. So we have gone from outside the skull, we are going inside now. We have become sophisticated. We have become what? More knowledgeable. So this is the folding, basically, of a 25-week, 30-week, 30. This whole diagram itself, it's very important to understand. Okay, so now, what is this being used for? What is this being used for? All these things that you see here, Gyrification Index is all used in these things. Evolutionary advantage, theories on causality, axonal tension, differential, genetic factors, cell biology. Look at all this. So all these things you are basing on this thing. So just remember, we just disproved Lunate Sulcus. How do you know that 20 years down the road this turns out not to be a myth? Huh? Let's look at the next. Okay, this is the big study of this stuff and University of Edinburgh. See who's funding this. Look at all this.
But How would you reject this? How could you reject this understanding of? Would you reject this understanding of workability? That if it works, it's good for us.
Yes. So you are talking about the pragmatic approach to science.
Yes. This is what
So there's no
said.
yes. So yes,
This
there's
is
no
what they
objective thing. We don't care about objective truth. All we care about it works now,
It explains us,
and that's it.
and it works.
It works now.
That's it.
That's it.
So now,
So then basically this, if someone takes this position, then that means science is not universal. They have just explained that.
this brother Muhammad Hijab said that in the video. He said that the knowledge which is been produced with this idea that it is not an objective.
Yes.
The scope of that knowledge is not objectivity of the truth.
Yes.
To know the truth.
Yes.
How can you use that knowledge and measure a knowledge like Islam, who stands for objectivity of the truth, who claims to be true, and whose domain is truth?
Yeah. So that's
Okay.
what I that's what I'm saying. So if you take that pragmatic
When
approach,
about comparing, you can't use this to measure that.
so that's what the thing is. If you take a relativistic, pragmatic approach to truth, then you cannot measure truth anymore. Then everything is right and everything is wrong, depending on who you are and what you are, right? So let's not go into that. So
Adnan sir, isn't it the pursuit of the knowledge is infinite?
yes,
When you pursue the knowledge, of course you pursue means you are going above the knowledge which you have already acquired.
yes,
So that becomes, the older knowledge becomes a myth.
Yeah.
You can call it a myth or an absolute.
no. Acquiring knowledge is a process which continues indefinitely. No doubt, that is correct.
Okay.
And the foundation on which this acquisition is based upon is firm, is never changing.
But that's in a starting point. Why you call it a foundation?
Or you want to call it the starting point, some people call it foundation, some people call so you starting that can never change. That remains as is. It's just like I gave you this example, like last time. You have a foundation of a house, right? You can build 20-story or you can build 100 stories, but that foundation remains the same. Knowledge, the point at which you start and then you continue, that starting point.
My point here is basically when you call something myth, and down the road a 2 years old acquired knowledge becomes a myth, or it's not true then.
Yeah,
Of course, when you keep on upgrading your knowledge base,
I agreed.
then your knowledge.
But the foundation doesn't change from where you started from. Either you believe that there's a reality outside, or either you believe you are created, or you believe you are not created. This is your starting point. Did you come into existence by yourself, or you were created? I will explain that later on. So gyrification is, look at this study. Cortical folding, the Lunate Sulcus, and the evolution of the human brain. Yes, this theory, the abstract itself will tell you that is used in the debate of evolution interpretations. Although these data do not localize the position of the Lunate Sulcus on the tongue endocast, the similarity in degrees of folding among hominids is consistent with interpretations. Not with data, just interpretations. Okay. Now look at the next. Look at the next paper. Failure of GI to account for volumetric reorganization in the evolution of the brain. So the previous one was supporting the evolution. This one is disproving evolution.
When that was written, the last one was?
That one was. This is 92. And the last one was when? 91. Within a year, right? Then we have now local gyrification index. This is being used again for in neuroscience and genetics to come about. I'm not going to go into the details of these things. Now you have big brain genes. Again, we are coming to the same point. So look at this now. is there a genetic contribution to cultural differences? Before, the question was, is there a craniometric basis of cultural differences? Now it is what? Is there a genetic contribution to cultural differences? So you, from the phenotype, you have entered to the genotype. But the question is again discrimination, scientific basis of racial profiling, of creating races of hierarchy, racial hierarchy. This is, again, you are doing the same thing. And remember, this is coming, this is where? Oxford Academic. See, what does it say? These results indicate that genetic variation may interact with ecological and social factors to influence psychocultural differences. You are saying the same thing, but using just different languages.
It's interesting how these studies always come from the Western universities.
Exactly. Thank you.
There's educational institutions all over the world, Asia, Africa, they have universities, but they don't make comments like this throughout history.
Yeah, but if you know if you follow the sequence of the presentation I present, this is not no stranger. I will share with you afterwards. Admitting that it's in infancy and much is more is to be learned. What nonsense is this? What nonsense is this? You have not learned anything and you're still ready to derive conclusions on oppressed people, and you have the audacity and arrogance to say we are still learning, but you are not arrogant, you're not humble enough not to be less oppressive. So this is the studies. Look at this tabloid news. Why the British are free thinking and the Chinese love conformity? It's all in the genes. This I could just swap the gene and say skull or skin, and this headline will be fit well in the 1800s. Do you know how many people read this newspaper, the Daily Mail? In UK is one of the popular newspapers.
Yeah.
And you are saying, and I mean, excuse me, but I really have to emphasize why British are free thinking, the democratic, liberal, freedom loving, and here Chinese timid.
That's just their perspective. I could easily look at it in that comment and say, well, it's actually more like the British have, more shameless than the Chinese. They have more.
Exactly, you are changing the frame of reference, right?
Exactly.
But the point is,
They're using gene.
but this word here, you just change. I put you the whole.
Using science for the racistic point of view.
This is like the articles in the 1800s.
Exactly.
It's just different, more fancier words, more modern words.
Yeah.
I mean, you need to be blind if you can't see this.
Yeah.
See, we demonstrate for first time an association between cultural values of individualism, collectivism, and the serotonin transporter gene. Absolute nonsense. I mean, the only person who is going to be mesmerized by this sentence is somebody who is illiterate in science. A little iota of knowledge of science, you will throw up. You will literally vomit when someone comes to you with this kind of nonsense.
So culture is infused in our genes, is what they're saying?
Yeah, can you just because look at the fancy word serotonin transporter gene. Woo! I'm supposed to die because it's totally mind-boggling how we swallow this nonsense.
So what was the relation, how they use the serotonin transporter gene as...
Basically what they are trying to show is there's a genetic component to culture and our behavior. This is called genetic determinism, which is another way of saying the same thing. What is the another way? What's the Indian subcontinent? How did they express that 4,000 years ago? Genetic determinism, how was it expressed? In
Caste system.
caste system. You were born that way. It's not your fault. You are like that.
Same kind of ignorance.
The only difference is you are using gene instead of theology to support that. That's the only difference.
So the thing is, the question will come: what's the truth about it?
Truth about what?
This serotonin transporter gene.
There's no truth in it. Give me paper. Give me empirical proof. Just because somebody has decided to publish this nonsense doesn't mean that. Let's continue. Otherwise, I would
All
bog
you
down.
have to do to refute that is just look at someone who's Chinese, who's adopted by a white American family when they were babies.
Thank you.
They're more like white people than Chinese people.
Thank you.
It's true, culturally speaking.
Yeah,
Right?
What happened?
So I said, easy way to refute that, nonsense is how he described it is look at some Chinese people who are orphans in China, and they were, taken by white American families. It happens a lot, right? White Americans, they go there, and they get them from orphanages because they're children. A lot of parents, they have 2 children, which is against the law, so they just put them in an orphanage in China. So a lot of white people from America, they'll go there, and they'll take them, because they can't have babies, and they'll raise them as American kids. And, sometimes they'll take them back to China to meet their original parents, biological parents, and there's no relation, no cultural similarity, nothing, just the looks. So that easily refutes that
This nonsense, yes.
right? That
Yes.
culture
This
is
is-
printed in our genes.
This is complete nonsense.
It's complete racism.
It's. I mean, there's no other way. It's just to support racist viewpoint.
Yeah.
The chunk is found. Just because you use, scientific sounding names that people are not familiar with. This has gone so bad that, in fact, voting and genetics is not joined together. So how you vote, who you vote for, has a genetic component or genetic basis. So basically what he's saying is, if I'm voting liberal, or I'm voting Liberal Party because I'm black, then all these black people, they're always voting liberal. This topic here really gets to me. You know why? Because how many people, they just swallow this hook, line, and sinker just because it is science. Transporter serotonin, dopamine, what is it?
But there is something more to it. Let me tell you. You said that people swallow because of science. A lot of people swallow it just because it is science, right? But there's another layer of before you swallow. There's a layer of choice. A lot of people love science, but if they're black, they're not gonna accept it.
Yeah.
So the barrier of choice is the last barrier.
Yeah,
before you solve it.
yeah. I agree. I mean, actually, we'll come to that. Your point. There's a case study on that. You'll see. I hope I'm able to reach that point. So I don't want to go into bog down. These are different books. Look at this book, The Evolutionary Origins of What Divides Us, Our Political Nature. And please, whenever I put a book here, always pay attention to who is writing this. Okay, we'll come back later on. Okay, so now nursery school personality. This is the classic study that is cited for voting and genetics. The genetics of politics. How does it? I mean, it has acquired its own name called Genopolitics. It won the 8th annual year in ideas. No wonder the New York Times will support it. Remember what New York Times supported? The display of a black man in the Bronx Zoo. You remember that? So if they supported that, have they really changed? Twin studies, and how are this is actually a whole specialty by itself to present. This is all done through twin studies. And twin studies, when I was in college, was given to us as the cream of experimental science, because these are twins, and if we can prove that these twins either are similar or dissimilar on some certain things, then it applies to everybody. And I, as a student, was very much impressed with anything that came with this, with this headline, twin study demonstrates or proves. You know what I'm saying? And hello, look at this. Conclusions reached via twin study, this method are ambiguous or meaningless.
सही बता देते हैं, पर एक twin study है क्या तो अच्छा नहीं लगता.
twin studies are basically comparing twins for a particular study. Identical twins
In the behavior.
in their any controlled behavior you are studying.
Any cohort study related to organic and inorganic.
Exactly. You want to demonstrate its validity by either the twins when they're living apart, like if a twin is here and a twin is there and they are eating the same chocolate. You say, you know what? There's a genetic component to eating chocolate.
So only the methods are being questioned.
Yes.
Methods.
And this guy,
Idea was still in the surface. Of
yeah,
another
this guy,
method.
what's his name? Cyril Burt was a psychologist and a genetist who contributed to a lot of the statistical idea of that. And then after he died, people found out that he actually committed fraud on all his papers. After he died, yes. So, fraudulent studies in science is another subject altogether. Remember, we have done that, a small part of it. Okay? So this is...
When you're doing knowledge and pseudoscience and all that stuff.
Yeah, so the trouble with twin studies, this is a book which critically examines twins research, and he relegates this to actually a place in pseudoscience. He doesn't, this doctor, J. Joseph, doesn't consider twin studies to be empirically scientific validity. He considers it to be pseudoscience. So anyway, that's his opinion. Look at this topic here. It says twin studies are pretty much useless. There's the cross-race effect. Let's leave all this neuroscience cross-race effect a little bit. Now, what is happening? Basically, I will tell you in a very quick manner, because I want to actually get. What's the time now? To get to a point here. All this now is being wrapped up to prove that there is a genetic basis of our racism.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, it's not my fault that I'm behaving badly to brother Adnan. It's not my fault. You know why? Because it's my gene. Brother Zubair slaps me. He can say, sorry. What can I do? I was born that way to slap you. So basically these studies here that you see all these things are, I'm kind of speaking in hyperbole, you understand, and stretching some of these things, but basically this is what they're trying to come to. Look at this one. It says, could a pill reduce racial bias? Basically, if we find out that there's a chemical basis of racism, just, take Prozac and, you're okay now, So there's actually that it starts another a whole aspect which is called neurochemistry. Neurochemistry, not the chemistry that you studied, but neurochemistry is altering people's behavior by pills. Happy pill. There's a pill that has been designed so that you can smell good.
Smell.
Instead of putting perfume, you can pop a pill and you will smell good.
Yeah, it's control the odors. Because
You will produce a smell. Good smell. It's going to come out of your sweat glands.
Yeah. So you can take a pill to reduce your anger. You can take a pill to be happy. You can take a pill to be sad. And so on and so forth. So that's the neuro altering behavior, and this is actually an active area of research. All this is being this basis. The science of your racist brain basically is trying to emphasize what? Is trying to emphasize that, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. We're all racist. Okay. So basically, we come back to that diagram that we were discussing the other time. No. For every section, I'm adding this thing. So here, previously we looked at these sciences. Now we have looked how these sciences are contributing to scientific racism. Is that clear now? This diagram is going to be, as I said, I'm building on this diagram. Each new study that comes, I will be putting it into the slide to show you how it is contributing to scientific racism. Yeah?